Good morning, church. We're so excited to worship with you this morning. I just want to invite you wherever you're at, wherever you're watching from, to find a space where you can engage. We're going to press into the Lord's presence this morning, and we're going to worship him because he's so holy and so worthy of all of our praise. We're going to introduce a new song to you this morning. First thing here, it's called Something Good. And if you tune in on Wednesdays on Facebook Live, Rob and I just introduced this song this last Wednesday during worship, and it's such a good song. The chorus says that I know that you are always up to something good. And we know that in the background that God is always moving. He's always working things together for good. And in Psalm 119, verse 68, it says, Lord, you are good and you do good. We know that God isn't good because he does good. He does good because he is good. Goodness is just his nature. And so this morning, I just want to invite you to join us as we learn this new song. Start singing along as you feel comfortable. When I'm in the roughest water, I won't go under, I won't drown. When I'm in Lord, we just give you praise this morning. We lift you high. You are so high and exalted. Lord, we love you so much, and we just declare here now that you are holy, you are worthy, you are so perfect, and you're lovely to look upon. And Lord, we just love to gaze upon your glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, thanks for tuning in today. I'm so honored to have you watching this and worshiping with us. If we've never had the opportunity to meet in person, my name is Mike. I'm the lead pastor here at Mountain View Church in Almsville, Oregon, and I'm praying that God will use the next 30 minutes that we spend together to speak directly into your life, like wherever you're watching this. I know that God's word says that He will speak to us if we come to Him and we seek Him, and I'm praying that happens in your life today. Before we get into today's message, I thought it might be kind of fun to introduce a new segment to these recordings. I'm calling it A Week in the Life, right? Maybe you've seen like these clips of kind of what is a week in the life or a day in the life like of maybe like a famous celebrity or athlete, or maybe like someone who works a really interesting job, you know, and you kind of see like their habits and kind of how they spend their day. I was thinking, what about a week in the life of Mountain View Church? Because, and I get it, like that's not as exciting as a celebrity. Okay, I understand that. But there's a lot going on a week-to-week basis right now in our church. And the reality is I know it doesn't maybe feel like that, right? I think it's important for us to realize this because it could feel like the church is closed, right? And like everything's canceled and we're awaiting some future where we can go back to being church. But that's just not true, because nothing can cancel the church, right? We've been saying this from day one. We're going through an unprecedented time in our world today. That's absolutely true. It's difficult. Someone said to me, last week in conversation, they said, Pastor, I think it's time we end this. And, I was kind of like, and what? Like, I wish I could, right? Like I wish I could just snap my fingers and all this would be over and we could go back to life as normal, whatever that is, right? But that's just not where we're at. And trust me, I'm feeling the weight of this moment just like you are. But at the same time, God is teaching me that like if we're looking for it, we will see the ways in which God is doing what God has always done, and that is drawing people to Himself and building His kingdom one life at a time. And so that's true in the life of our church on a week-to-week basis. So like what has happened in the life of Mountain View this week? Well, last Sunday we had church in the park. And I know a lot of you watching this were with us, and man, it was just so good, right? So good to be back around other people. The worship team sounded amazing. The sun was shining. The kids are running around playing. I got to preach to real life human beings again. That's pretty nice. Some of you even laughed at my jokes. I appreciated that because I haven't gotten to hear that for quite a while. And if you haven't heard, if you weren't able to make it, we're actually going to be back in the park on August 16th. Okay, so if you didn't make it this time, make sure you put August 16th on the calendar. And something different about that church in the park is we're actually going to be having a time of baptisms. So if you've been around Mountain View for a while, you know we typically do that every August in the park. And so we're going to do that again. I'm really excited. I've already got one person talking to me about baptism, and but maybe you're watching this and that's something that you've been wondering about, or a next step you feel God calling you to take in your faith. I'd love to have a conversation with you and help you understand what baptism is all about, and let you know how we kind of do that at Mountain View. And so the way you can sign up for that, if you go to our website, mtviewchurch.net/baptism, there's a little quick sign up there, and I'll get in touch with you and we'll just have a conversation. But I'm really eager for that day on August 16th. What else has happened? What else has happened this week? We had our Rocky Railway kits delivered. So our kind of at-home online VBS adventure has begun. We handed all those kits out, and over 100 kids are participating in that. As I'm recording this, is day 2, and over 100 kits went out into our community and into our church homes. And I want you to understand something. that's more kids than we ever reached on a single night of VBS, right? Like our highs last year in our building, our traditional VBS was like 80 something. And so we're reaching more kids like I prayed for through this kind of unusual creative method. And so I'm excited about that. Kurt and Brenda, they did a phenomenal job putting that together. You could go on YouTube if you want to watch the videos. Go on our YouTube channel and check those out. They're a lot of fun. And we even discovered that we've got a few talented actors and actresses in our church. And so we'll be making sure that we keep their contacts and use them for future productions. But there's so much going on. I guess that's just what I want you to know. And like we could talk about the food that we collected and put on people's porches this week, all kinds of stuff. But we got to get to the message. But like here's the bottom line. I just want you to hear from me. God is still working. He isn't taking the summer off. He's not intimidated by this moment. And so we're doing the same thing. We're still working. We're still just trying to keep looking for ways to partner with God to growing whole followers of Jesus for our whole community, right? The flourishing of our whole community, rather, right? Our vision, our mission hasn't changed. And so we're still moving forward with God's grace. Okay, so we're in the series called Labeled. Looking at how we identify ourselves. So if you've missed any of the past 3 weeks, I encourage you to go and check those out. But the words or the phrases that we might use or that other people might use to define who we are. And I want to repeat something that I said last week at the park because I know not everyone could make it. And unfortunately, we had some technical difficulties, so we weren't able to record the sermon podcast like we usually do. Apologies for that. But here's the idea, and I want to make sure I repeat this so that we really get it, okay? The words we use not only have a shelf life, but also the power to shape life. Okay, the words that we use not only have a shelf life, but also the power to shape life. Our words, whether we're talking to ourselves or we're talking at others, our words are incredibly sticky. And not only do they make a lasting impression, but they also shape the way that we see ourselves. And the way that we see ourselves and identify ourselves then shapes the way we live. And that's why this is so important for us to understand. That's why we're doing this series, because if that's true, then I want to know, what labels does God use when he looks at me and thinks about me? I don't want to be a prisoner to the words of others, and I can't always trust my own mind even to tell me the truth. You know what I mean? And so I know that God never lies, and so I want God to speak his word and his statements of identity into my life because he created me and I can trust him. And so to that end, we're looking at key phrases or words in the New Testament book of Ephesians that describes our identity in Christ. And so if you have a Bible, open up there with me to Ephesians. If you're using the event page there, and you can catch the notes for today and the outline and all that kind of stuff. But today we're going to be in Ephesians chapter 3, starting in verse 14. And what you'll notice that we have here is actually a prayer. It's a prayer that Paul, the author of Ephesians, is praying on behalf of the Christians there in the church of Ephesus. That's why it's called Ephesians. That's the town. And so he's praying it for these people, but I think it's a prayer that he would offer for you and me as well today. But before we read it, I want to pose a question. I wonder how many of us would say today that there is something more that we want. Like if I would put a microphone up and ask you to answer this question, if I ask you to finish this sentence, I want more blank. What would you put in there? I want more. Maybe it's money. I want more money. Maybe it's more house, more acreage. You could be having a tough morning. Maybe it's more coffee today as you're watching this. Could be more respect, more status, more children even. Sometimes we can't even exactly name what it is, but there's just this nagging internal sense that there's got to be something more to life, something more fulfilling. Honestly, currently, if you asked me that and I had to fill in the blank, I would say that I need more car. Like, not more cars. I don't need more to the lot, but like I need more of a car. My wife and I, we have 3 young kids, 8, 5, and just turned 1. And we've managed to somehow fit them all in the back of this Toyota Camry for a few years now. But as our kids are getting older and there's more stuff for the car trips, especially as my 1-year-old is getting into a bigger seat soon and all that, we're just realizing like this isn't going to work for very much longer. And we're beginning to have visions of a minivan in our future, right? A Honda Odyssey, if my wife has her dream, okay? Which, this is 36, apparently, folks. Like, you dream of minivans. This is what my life has become. But there's nothing wrong with that desire, right? There's nothing wrong with this feeling of wanting more. In fact, I think God has actually put that desire in us. The question is, what do you want more of? And if you got that something, would it actually satisfy you? Like, if you got whatever I want more blank, whatever you put in that blank, if you got that, would that finally end your quest for more? If we're honest, probably not. There would always be something else. Advertising, which is basically propaganda. Like, we know this. We kind of know this is how marketing and advertising works, but we're powerless to escape it. It wasn't always this way, but it's grown increasingly worse, especially since World War II. Right after World War II, there was actually an article that was published by a banker who at the time worked for the Lehman Brothers, and he just kind of admitted this goal of advertising and marketing. Here's what he said. Listen to this. We must shift America from a needs to a desire culture. People must be trained to desire, to want new things, even before the old has been entirely consumed. We must shape a new mentality in America. Man's desires must overshadow his needs. And so we just need to understand this, that for the last 80 to 90 years, we have been trained on purpose to want more, to always want more, to be led by our desires to the next thing, even before this thing is done, with the promise that this next thing would satisfy us and make us happy. But what if you didn't need more because you were already full? You were already full. That's essentially what Paul prays for us here. I want you to listen to the words of this. Ephesians chapter 3. Listen to what Paul prays for. He says, "For this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name. I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God." Wow. That's a prayer right there. And I want to point out a few specific things that Paul asked God to fill us with. But before we do that, I want you to notice something. Okay, I want you to notice that Paul's first move in this moment is prayer. Right? When he thinks about what these people in Ephesus need and what you and I really need, Paul's first move is to go directly to the Heavenly Father and ask God to supply it. Right? And I think that's important because Paul knows something that you and I think sometimes forget, that the only thing that can truly satisfy us is going to be found right there in connection with our Heavenly Father. It's not going to be bought on Amazon and shipped to you in a day, maybe even a single day. It's not going to be by getting in line for the next iPhone in the Apple Store. It's not going to be found in the next relationship, the next marriage, whatever that is. That the fullness that we are designed to experience is only found in God. I think one of the best summaries of the situation that you and I find ourselves in is by Dallas Willard. He's a Christian philosopher and theologian. He's passed now. But here's what he says. He writes, desire is infinite. Okay? We always want something. Desire is infinite. Partly because we were made by God, made for God, made to need God, and made to run on God. We can be satisfied only by the one who is infinite, eternal, and able to supply all our needs. But when we fall away from God, listen to this, the desire for the infinite still remains, but is displaced upon things that will lead to destruction. So what Paul is praying here, he's praying that you and I would realize that we don't need to chase more and all of these other things. We wouldn't have to go through the searching to find satisfaction in the things of the world, because that's only going to leave us wanting more and more and more. And we wouldn't even have to do that because we would already be full. We would already be satisfied with God himself. And there are two things that he really focuses on, that he asks God to fill us with here. Right, the first one is, he says that we would be full of God's power, that we would know the power of God. Verse 16, he says that God may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being. Verse 17, he says, and I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power. Right, that word shows up several times in this section, but the Greek word, right, New Testament's written in Greek, the Greek word Paul's using there is dunamis, which is the root of where we get our English word dynamite. And so it's this explosive strength, but it's not meant to like blow things up, right? If we're honest, like we're pretty good at blowing things up on our own. We don't really need God's help with that one. We've got that covered, right? It's not that. It's the power of God in us to accomplish things that our natural ability can't do, right? So in verse 20, he kind of hammers this home, and I'm going to emphasize this, but he says, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. Right? Paul just drives it home. It's like you're able to do immeasurably more, not because you're so strong, but because it's God's power at work in you, in your inner being. And so when we're full of God and his Spirit, this is the thing I want us to understand. We don't have to seek power in other ways, because we all do that, right? We all want more position, whether that's at home or at work or at school. We all sometimes feel the need to kind of puff up and power up, level up. We don't have to do that if we know I'm already full. Right? I'm already full of God's power, which is more power than anything I'm trying to muster up on my own anyway. Any kind of power the world would want to give me, like it can't compare to that anyway. Therefore, I don't have to seek that through illegitimate means and means that could potentially lead to my destruction. And it's not on the outside. He says it's an inner strength. Right? There's a deep inner sense of power and strength that comes from being full of God's presence and his Spirit. So the first is power. The other thing here that Paul focuses on is that we would know what it means to be full of God's love. Full of God's love. Listen again, I want verses 18 and 19 here. He says, and I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Some of us just need to sit on this one today, because we've probably heard it several times, and we kind of just sweep it aside and we move on, or maybe it's like it bounces off of us. Like we're at a place in our life where we're so hard that we can't accept it, we don't hear it. I just want you to hear again today that you are loved. You're loved. And there's nothing you can do to change that. You're as loved today as you were yesterday, as you will be tomorrow. And I want us to just imagine for a second, those of us who struggle to truly in our heart believe that we are loved, just for a minute, imagine with me what your life would look like, what would be different if you didn't have to spend so much of your mental and emotional energy chasing love. Like if you knew you were already loved, that the creator of the universe wanted to fill you with his love, how much might that change the way that you live? Paul prays here that you would experience that for yourself. Now, when he says know, like I want you to know this love, he's not talking about head knowledge. Like I'm not sure we can ever fully, wrap our mind around the love of God or even love in general. Like what does it mean to really love? But he's not talking about our minds here. He's talking about experiencing it. Right? You'll never completely understand love cognitively, but you will know that you have experienced the love of God. And the way that you'll know that is because you'll quickly be able to identify the counterfeit versions that this world tries to sell you. Right? When you have experienced the genuine article, the real love of God, you will no longer find yourself desiring the cheap imitations that are everywhere around us, because they just won't be as attractive to you. They just won't be as fulfilling. Now the question is, though, is how do we get full? Of all the statements that we've looked at in this series, a lot of them are things that we claim. I am blessed. I am strong. I am chosen. This one, for a lot of us, it's more of an aspirational value than it is an actual value. You know what I mean? Like it's something that we aspire to, but many of us might just say, I'm not really sure I feel full. How do I get there? Well, it may sound simple, but the best thing I can tell you is that what you fill your time with will fill you. Right? What you fill your time with will fill you, whether for good or bad. I mean, in verse 17, Paul prays this idea that Christ may dwell in our hearts. And that word dwell really just kind of pops off the page at me. And so I kind of dug into that a little bit, and what I discovered is that there's actually a few different words that Paul could have chosen for a dwelling. There's lots of words in the Greek for buildings and those kinds of things. But the word that Paul uses here refers to a permanent structure. So it's not a tent or anything like that. God, in other words, God is not interested in renting a side space in your heart. He's not visiting for a little while. This isn't just a weekend vacation that Paul's talking about here. He wants to buy the whole thing and move in and take up residency within you, to dwell in you. But he's not going to force it, right? That won't happen unless you want him in. And so you'll never be full of God until pursuing him as your number one priority. Right? In his book, Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell popularized this idea of the 10,000 hour rule, that as he looked at the lives of experts, musicians, scientists, athletes, that kind of stuff, he found that it took on average like 10,000 hours of what he would call deliberate practice in order to even have a chance at becoming an expert and mastering something. Right? People who want to be great at something, whatever it is, devote every waking hour to it. Right? Their entire lives are wrapped around that thing, to knowing it, to honing their craft. I mean, think of all the time and energy that you spend, for example, to like shoot one deer a year. Think about all that goes into that process. or to become an expert piano player. For me, I'm looking at this, I've had a goal for the last several years of breaking 80 on a golf course, which may not matter to you, but for me it's a big deal. And I think about all of the hours and time and money and energy I put into a goal like that. And yet, if we're honest, a lot of us pursue God for an hour a week, maybe an hour a day. And then we kind of wonder, why do I feel like something's missing? Like, why do I read this passage that talks about, experiencing the fullness of God and I don't get it? Right? Paul's prayer is that we would be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God, all of God's power, all of God's love. But if we want to experience that, then we have to pursue him. And way more than an hour a week, way more than we pursue the cares of this world and the things that we say are important to us and that we value. We've got to put that pursuit of knowing Christ and allowing him to dwell in us as the number one thing in our life. And when we do that, what will happen is we'll realize how cheap and unsatisfying all the rest of those things really are. Right? We'll begin to identify the things that we say are love and power and all these things, and we'll be able to look at them and say, man, that's like a cheap appetizer to the real thing, to being full of the full measure of God. Let me pray for us. God, of all the statements we've looked at so far, this is probably the one that, again, I would say for most of us is more of an aspirational statement. And there's power in that, though. There's power in saying who we want to be. Like, I want to be full. I want to be full of your Spirit. I want to be full of your love and of your power. I want to be full of you. And so, God, I pray that we would claim that today as we're watching this. I pray that we would ask you to fill us. Fill us with more of you. Give us more. Right, we don't need more of anything this world has to offer. We've already tried that. We've already seen the dead ends that leads to. What we need is more of you. And I pray that you would satisfy us with your presence and with your power and your love. God, for those of us who might just admit today, like we're spending so much of our energy and time trying to get love, trying to get power, all of these things that you have said that we are already full of if we are in Christ. If you dwell in us, God, I pray that you would just show us that. Help us to not just know it in our heads, but would you help us experience it in our life this week so we know exactly what this passage is talking about. We pray this in your Son's name. Amen.